Stan Gibilisco here, looking at another propagation overview from Paja Sapa, also known as the Black Hills, the center of all that is, and the place where the Lakota people come to pray for the state of the world. I am the proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV Whiskey 1 Golf Victor, as well as the prime elder of the magnates of Malarkey, the fearless leader of the barons of Baloney, and the supreme commander of the sultans of stupidity. The date, January 6, 2014. The time, 3:08 p.m. Mountain Standard, 22:08 Zulu. We are listening to W1AW, a bulletin transmission, ironically a propagation forecast bulletin, on 40 meters. They're coming in pretty well. Let's go and look at them on 20 meters. They're coming in better here. They have a 2 or 3 element Yagi, possibly 2 stacked ones. I don't recall exactly. I think they have a Yagi on 40 meters too, pointed right at me, more or less, right at San Francisco, and that goes right over me as well, pretty much. So it's not surprising that they're coming in pretty well here. Fairly well on 18 megahertz, and quite well on 21 megahertz. But on 28 megahertz, I don't hear them. Now, what's been happening lately, I can use these transmissions on these various frequencies as a sort of a beacon to evaluate the propagation conditions between here and Newington, Connecticut. Notice how strong that signal is at times. Approaching, it's about 10 dB over S9 right now. Now it's S9 on my meter. Now, I don't call a signal extremely strong. That is S9, truly S9, unless it's 20 dB or more over on my radio, this IC746 Pro. So I'd give this signal right here about an S7 to S8. Anyway, what's going to happen here quite soon, because the sun will go down at about 4:15 or 4:30 p.m. here at this time of the year. The gray line, or the terminator, or the place where the twilight is on the Earth, where the sun is on the horizon, moves from east to west across the region, and it should be now somewhere around the Great Lakes. What's going to happen, if it's following the pattern that I've observed over the past number of days, is that the signal here on 21 megahertz will get strong and then will fade rapidly. And within the space of 5 minutes, this band may go from good like this to really rotten. That's what's been happening. And then we'll have to go to 18 megahertz, where the same phenomenon will take place a little while later as the maximum usable frequency falls. Then we'll have to go to 14 megahertz. And if it follows the pattern that it has over the past few days, the same thing will happen here. So in order to hear W1AW, have to go all the way down to 7 megahertz. And on some nights, I've actually observed the same thing happen on 7 megahertz. Now, on 3.5 megahertz, I have, this is their frequency right here, I believe, 3581.50. I have rarely heard them on this frequency at all. But last night I had a very interesting experience. Even though my antenna is optimized for 20 meters and won't work worth beans on lower frequencies because it's a capacitively loaded vertical, 22 feet high, 50 picofarads of capacitance at the base, provides resonance on 14 megahertz as a quarter wave vertical. But It will not work really very well on any other frequency. I can force feed it at higher frequencies and get away with it, but at lower frequencies, no go. So, but what I did last night, even though this antenna is certainly anything but optimal for 160 meters, late last night, probably 10 p.m., and it's very rare for me to be up on the radio at 10 p.m., I'm usually preparing my pink slime and broccoli and cauliflower and sunflower seeds and mushrooms to consume at 11 p.m., which constitutes, what would you call it, breakfast or dinner? Maybe brinner or brupper. Breakfast or supper? Brupper. Like brunch, except brupper. I mean, it could serve as either one, right? Or maybe it could serve as a, oh gosh, you know, you tell me. But anyway, the frequency agreements and arrangements on this band have changed since the late 1980s when I frequented this band at my parents' house as I was recovering from a serious injury. Had only one arm that was functional, and I learned it was my left arm, and I was right-handed, so I learned very quickly how to send CW left-handed and do everything else left-handed too, including string up an 800-foot-long wire in sub-zero temperatures with one arm on irregular terrain in deep snow. I did it because I wanted to get on the air bad, obviously. And the temperatures the past couple days here have been sub-zero. They've made a big deal out of it all over the whole country. The mayor of Indianapolis has declared it illegal to drive, I believe, except in emergencies because it's so cold. Like what, 15 below zero? Shoot, when I grew up in Minnesota, 15 below zero was not really that bad. 25 below was getting pretty nippy, and 30 below, that was cold. Anyway, I mean, I don't know. I think the whole world is getting wussified, including me, by the way. I admit it. I'm a real wuss. I may come off as some sort of a rough guy, the way I talk on here, but I'm a real wuss. 5'6", 120 pounds. Well, it's a little early to hear anything on this band right now, but I actually heard some really good signals from one of them from Utah last night. The guy was working DX. But back in that day, I had a balloon-supported antenna on 160 meters. I got tired of the long wire, was too close to the ground, so I got a balloon-supported antenna. And I strung that thing up. Now, I don't know what the FAA regulations were back then, but I strung that thing up as a quarter-wave vertical, about 125 feet, with a balloon and a lot of radials laying under the snow, and wow! I was on 160 meters, and they were on a hilltop too. And all the utility wires were buried under the ground. They had come into the 21st century a little bit early up there in Rochester, Minnesota. That's a pretty progressive state, by the way. They're pretty enlightened over there in Minnesota. I mean, they come up with some really cockamamie ideas every now and then, but doesn't every enlightened person come up with some cockamamie ideas? Unenlightened people don't come up with any ideas. They just criticize everybody. Well, that's my yammering, and that's my take on this. I'm going to just conclude this little ditty with a check of the Chaos Band. That is the acid test. Signal! Let there be signals. I'm not going to try and listen to any of these. We're getting pretty old in this video. It's getting to be pretty big, pretty long. Pretty tedious for you, I'm sure. The old emergency channel 9. I have it in SSB mode so you can hear the signals as heterodynes. They're easier to hear. But the point is this. This band is open. But 10 meters seems to be dead. Now, why is that? Wait a minute. I thought I heard a signal. No. Just another one of those weird appliances that pollutes the airwaves with all sorts of electromagnetic rubbish. Well, I've polluted your earwaves with enough Stangibelisco magnates of malarkey rubbish. So I'll sign off. Stangibelisco W1GV, Whiskey 1 Golf Victor, saying 73. Get on the radio. So long.